and the purpose of this hearing.
And they're numbered 56. And at the time they were presented to me, I was still trying to talk Percy Foreman into trial.
The chair will recognize the chairman of the Martin Luther King Subcommittee, Congressman Walter Fauntleroy.
Mr. Pryor, before the question begins, I'd like to make an objection under your Rule 3.5.
The chair will note that the date of March 17th is the date which appears on the document in question, and is glad to clarify the record for that purpose.
Thank you. I have a motion at this time. Yesterday we called for the production of the handwritten documents by Mr. Ray, which this committee has, in which he stated in clarity, perhaps in error, but certainly in clarity, and he insists that he was not in error, every motel and hotel that he stopped in between March 30th and April 4th. You now have your big headlines. Your document has been published to all of the newspapers around the country. May we now have the truth. We again call for the production of the original handwritten documents by Mr. Ray so he can refresh his recollection and give you the facts as clearly as he can. We also call for production of all of the FBI reports which you have showing where he was on April 1st, April 2nd. We also call for all of your investigative reports, because I'm sure you checked out, may I just finish my request? I'm sure you checked out his statement, which you have from Mr. Huey's notes, which he gave to Mr. Huey, as to where he was, the hotels and the motels and the cities that he claims he checked into. We ask for all of that material at this time. We asked for it yesterday. You said it would be made available. We still have not had it. You are the sole repository of this information, which you have been suppressing since we've been asking for it. We ask for it again now.
Mr. Lane, the chair has been very tolerant with your discussion of these matters. Let me state when it may appear that the chair seems to be in the business of cutting you off.
Yes.
What I am only trying to do is to carry out the rules of the House of Representatives and the rules of this committee. This is a legislative fact-finding hearing. This committee cannot convict Mr. Ray of anything. On the other hand, we cannot grant him a new trial. That can only be done through the court system. The rules are very different in a legislative hearing than in a courtroom proceeding. Here, the witness, Mr. James Earl Ray, is the star. He can testify to anything he wants to testify to. We have freely allowed him to testify to it.
You have not given him the documents he's asked for. That's the point. We're not talking about the star system here. We're asking for basic decency.
Allow the chair one moment to speak without interruption, Mr. Lane. Mr. Ray has not been cut off. He will not be cut off. The attorney, on the other hand, is only here to advise the client as to his constitutional rights. You have been cut off from time to time in accordance with the rules of the House. Now, the committee will insist that it controlled the proceedings in this hearing room and that the rules of the House will be followed.
Yes.
At this time, we will not hear any further arguments on this point. The chair will deny the motion.
We are not prepared to proceed until we can look at those documents. You are the sole repository of all of that information. You had my moment on his vacation.
Did Percy Foreman write that or me? Was it him?
Pardon?
Did you say, did Percy Foreman write that letter or did I write it to him?
No, I said probably, I assume he wrote it, but you signed it. Is that correct?
Yes, I don't have that here. Could I read that a second? I haven't seen that in about 10 years.
I thought you had it signed that way.
Fraudulent document here. I'll attempt to explain why.
Well, we'll let you point that out as we go along.
Yeah, but I don't like to read a fraudulent document off on the news meeting. I know you're reading this for the news meeting, and I'd like to explain it before we get into the...
Well, sure, go ahead.
This is the first document he...
Excuse me one second. First of all, I'd like to have a short time for Mr. Ray to read the document before we proceed with his explanation. May we have that, Mr.
The first set of stipulations were presented to me, arguing back and forth on these stipulations. And he would say, well, which one don't you agree to? And I'd say, well, this one and this one, and he'd make a pencil mark on it. And he was negotiating back and forth with the prosecuting attorney. And now this is, like I say, is the first one. Now, he had one article in here about it's 17, he's got that inked out now. This was, at this time, William Bradford Huey was having some type of a controversy with George Wallace. And they're both from Alabama. And Huey wanted to get some stipulation in here about Wallace. And I didn't think that was my political interest, and I had him take it out. Well, then he come back with a second set of stipulations, and they were 55, I think. Well, I disagreed with them, and now they came up missing somewhere for several years, or not several years, I'd say about 1 year. Anyway, when I sued Percy Foreman for breach of contract and civil rights violation, he filed another set of stipulations in a district court in Memphis. Now, we started arguing about these stipulations some more right up until a couple days before the guilty plea. I do recall that there were 4 sets of stipulations. The last set of stipulations, I believe, was what you call the voir dire. And that was about, I don't know how many questions were stipulations on there.
Well, let me just interrupt briefly. The voir dire is what the judge asks you verbally in the courtroom, and we will get to that next.
Well, that's what...
But first, we're going to talk about that. Defendant took up residence at the St. Francis Hotel in Los Angeles on 1/21/68. 23, that on March 5, 1968, defendant had plastic surgery performed on his nose by Dr. Russell C. Hadley in Hollywood, California. S-A-N-E-Y-A to Sneed, S-A-N-E-Y-D, and that page is initialed by both you and Percy Foreman, correct?
Yes.
50, that on May 17, 1968, defendant flew back to London. 51, that in London the defendant and Sneed lived respectively at the Heathfield House.
Do you have an extra copy we can make notes on? Now, Mr. Sawyer, if you're going to ask questions about... But he's referring to a statement made by Mr. Foreman. And that statement was made by Mr. Foreman on a page which you have not excerpted. And that is page 15 and 16.
These funds over and above the first $165,000 will be held by such bank, trust company, or individual subject to your order. I have either spent or obligated myself to spend in excess of $14,000, and I think these expenses should be paid in addition to a $150,000 fee. I am sure the expenses will exceed $15,000, but I am willing to rest on that figure. Letter number of 9, any other advancements, just this $500. And this advance also is contingent upon the plea of guilty and the sentence going through on March 10th, 1969, without any unseemly conduct on your part in court. P.S. The rifle and the white Mustang were tied up in a suit filed by Renfro Haynes, the private detective who worked for Mr. Haynes. Court costs and attorney fees will be necessary perhaps to get them released. I will credit the $165,000 with whatever.
James Earl Ray's defense continues to crumble before the House Assassinations Committee. I'm Sue Mathis, and I'll have that story. James Earl Ray's defense continues to crumble before the House Assassinations Committee. I'm Sue Mathis, and I'll have that story.